right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Claudia Souza with ASG, and I lead the Cloud Software Defined Workflow team, and I am very excited to welcome you here today and to have our first panel be a panel about where are we today in cloud live production, who's using it, how are they using it, tell us about the adventures of how you got where you are. And we have quite an esteemed panel of people who have been using it at scale, day to day, and they're here to share their stories and hopefully answer some questions that you have. So we're gonna start by asking you to each introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where are you in your cloud journey, how are you using it today for cloud live production?
Good morning, everybody. Jason Hedgecock, Major League Baseball. One of the, I think probably our biggest thing that we're doing with cloud is we're doing full cloud production end to end. Really a lot of that is our international stuff for at scale, but full productions, announcers on site, and cutting it in the cloud and distribution through the cloud services.
Good morning. Jim Miles, NBC Sports Olympics. We're not quite full production. We're 75% science, but we're getting there. And we've done some pretty impressive things for the Olympics and for our day-to-day operations that I'll talk a little bit more about.
Grant from the NHL. We've done a live game broadcast in the regular season last year. We've kicked the tires on doing that a couple of times this year. I think the OV chase took some of the oxygen out of a lot of things for us in terms of being experimental, because I think we really wanted to make sure that we were honoring that kind of historical moment for us. But we've really been looking at ways that we can use the cloud as a kind of like force multiplier for doing hybrid broadcasts and altcasts and things like that. The data casts that we've been doing with Beyond Sports for animated content has been really, leveraging that cloud environment. And it's really now, it's kind of retrenching a little bit and going and filling in all the blanks so that we can really start to say that we can do this without a full-size truck in the arena, right? And so it takes a little bit of a stretch to get from the point where you still have a line cut coming out of a truck, and you still have a kind of a crew on-prem that's part of your kind of ultimate show. And we really want to kind of go and stretch our legs and see how close we can get to actually not needing that.
Hello, Jeff Norman, WBD. First time here at SVG, so I'm happy to be here speaking about our cloud production platform that we're getting started with. And proud to say that we actually have 4 working cloud production control rooms already online in Atlanta. Just launched one here in New York. Steven, I see you right there. And we're really right now, we're just using it as a kind of an integration room where it's think of master control on steroids, but it's working extremely well. One of our main goals, one thing that we really identified early on was making sure that the experience for the users was a very familiar feel, so that they would walk into a cloud production control room and feel like, this is the same thing I use all the time. So I think that we've done a really good job of trying to design it that way. It's pretty close to a traditional control room. Still early days. We're still working on getting a little bit more capacity in there and working on that latency bit, as you all are familiar with that, I'm sure. But it's getting better, and this is just the beginning. And I keep telling myself this is the worst it's ever going to be. So we just keep pushing forward, and we've got, I think, a really good product that we've got going on right now. So thank you.
Sure, and hey folks, I'm Brian Samus. I'm a specialist solutions architect with AWS. I have the great pleasure of working with a number of customers on their live cloud production journeys, as well as our partners. We've had some really great success stories with people doing live cloud production over the last few years. For example, PGA Tour is doing all of their Every Shot live from the cloud. So they've got 80 cameras coming in to the cloud. They're producing 36 unique program feeds. that are being powered by 50 different operators across 2 different continents. So that's the type of kind of horizontal scale that the cloud enables you to get in your live productions that are really, really difficult to replicate if you're trying to do that fully on-prem. We've also done a lot of work with folks like CBS Sports Digital, who are now using cloud-based tools to do both MCR and PCR type functionality on over 2,000 soccer games that go out to their digital viewers. And then finally, another great story recently is the work we did with ELF, which is the European League of Football. The European League of Football is an American football league that's based in Europe. And they decide in 2025, so far this year, they've done over 70% of their games using a full kind of REMI cloud-based production model, where they've saved a very significant amount of money, not only on crew travel, on carbon, but in addition to that, they're able to scale to however many games they need to cover by simply, sending out additional fly kits and not having to build out new PCRs. So that's been really game-changing, and it's been really exciting to be parts of those projects.
Thank you. One of the things that we talked about on the prep call is, as we're discussing the scalability, as we're discussing about, are you saving money, are you making more money, what's the point of moving to the cloud? Because moving to the cloud for cloud's sakes makes no sense. So one of the things that you were talking about, Jason, was the scalability, was what cloud has enabled you to do, especially for the international events and international coverage. Can you touch a little bit upon that?
Yeah, I think for us, what we like about the cloud is, as sales and other groups want to bring in more international audience, which I think we all want more audience, and and it allows you to get products for that audience in their native languages, whether that's through graphics, whether that's through announcers, but you can do it in a very economical model using stuff you already have, and that you don't necessarily need to bring in more crew to do it to site. And a lot of times with time changes, it's easier to use people where they are anyway. And so we're able to scale and really tailor a production to individuals in individual countries and distribution. But then, of course, the other side of that is sponsorship. Sponsorship can sell different ads in different locations, and it becomes very easy to add those in organically without adding necessarily more delay. I think a lot of our traditional editions of that are going to be downstream models of erase and replace, or other graphics types of things further downstream, adding latency, where now we can do it in the cloud and everyone's still receiving it all at relatively the same time.
So beyond saving money, you're making more money, you're finding additional revenue streams by being able to go after these different markets in real time with live produced content.
Yeah, which then allows us to do more fun things on site, because you can't bring in the fun cameras if you're spending all your money on other stuff. So this is a good way to enhance productions as well.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, for us, it was actually on the acquisition side that we were able to leverage some of the scale. During the Paris Olympics, we were able to double our ingest capacity for our primary asset management system, but only for 17 days. So in the past, we had to do that by buying racks and racks of hardware. So it was definitely a game changer for us, and it let us do everything as opposed to just having to pick and choose what we could afford.
Yeah, so I would like to just point out that what Jason said when he introduced us earlier and said this is an experiment. This is not an experiment. Yes. So to be honest, certainly Jason is onto something with international, and I think that's where we're really leaning in right now. I think we've done some testing with doing our digital enhanced dashboard rendering in the cloud. When faced with the idea, right now we do as many as 5 different renditions for different regions in the world with different ad inventory. And all of that is done at PSSI in Pittsburgh using hardware rendering. And I think that given that repurchasing that when it comes time to refresh that equipment is a fairly scary thought right now, given the where trade is right now. The idea that we could move that workload into the cloud entirely and save a significant amount of capital dollars doing so is a serious impetus for us, right? So really leaning in on being able to provide bespoke international broadcasts for a particular region that are specifically targeted for that region, and start to really. The amazing thing is we start to see a lot of the teams who have always been reticent to have midday, weekday, games, all of a sudden showing interest in having it, in saying, I'll do a couple of midweek games so that we can get in front of this international audience and start to look at ways that we can grow our own brand with an international audience. So I think it's really an interesting time for the business because it really changes the revenue possibilities for your sport and makes it really a global thing and not as has traditionally been a predominantly domestic market.
Well, and the flexibility. So we always talk about the buzzwords, the scalability, flexibility, but here's flexibility in action. The ability that you have to give your internal stakeholders additional ways of producing content to additional markets or just in a broader sense. One of the things that we talk about often is that there's a lot of fear associated with moving to the cloud. And some of that fear is around this idea of it's all or nothing. Oh my goodness, I've built these amazing facilities and now I've got to abandon all that and my operators have to learn everything new. Lots of fear around that. But several of you have taken different approaches. And some of those approaches are it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can step in, you can use it for the right tool, for the right thing. So tell me a little bit, I know one of you has done it a lot more full scale, but most of you seem to be using it more for niche, special applications. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for sure. A lot of it has been, looking at, hey, how can we differentiate our content and deliver it to people, to fans, that are not necessarily consuming it in the old-fashioned way, right? And so really being able to be responsive to those fans is super important, right? Because we've got a bit of a generational divide in how people consume content.
Oh, yeah.
Witness the opening when we were talking about watching TV on a mobile device. Certainly none of us really grew up watching TV on mobile devices because there were no mobile devices, and frankly, Zenith has never come out with an API that I'm aware of that made their TV addressable in any way. So so really we're coming from a place from when we grew up into this business where none of these things were possible, and the idea that all of these possibilities now exist and really are there to be leveraged if you have the wherewithal to do it is pretty amazing.
I agree. I think one of the things that I want to talk a little bit about are the fears, about the challenges that you guys have faced, how they've overcome, because there are so many fears around the technical aspects, but beyond the technical aspects. Are my operators going to want to do and cut a show where they're in different locations and they're not all in the same, little box, physically there with each other? I will say, I often say that it is generational to me. I look at my kids and they actually prefer to talk to each other and their friends on devices. I mean, even if they're in the same room, I swear, they're, talking to each other on the device. And so a lot of the customers that I've worked with, especially in the early days of this, they were the generation that was a bit more comfortable with that communication that happens, so that there can be operators in 6 different countries, and to them it makes no difference. So the technology is there. The communication is there. You can do comms where it feels like you're all in the same location. But let's not forget, we do have to address our key stakeholders' fears and concerns about that. So tell me a little bit about some of the challenges you faced as you tried to get your teams to make this move.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the challenges for us was just getting, first, people hear cloud, and the first thing they think of is the experiences that they started having early on in the pandemic. And that was one of the, for what it's worth, we were able to take a lot more risks early on in the pandemic, but the experience that operators had was generally, not the greatest. So we've been working really hard to overcome that. And the goal was really to just put them in front of something that really felt familiar to them, and gave them the same kind of experience and reliability that they have always come to expect in a traditional control room. And then I don't want to throw around the word traditional, but just so everybody knows, one thing is not a cloud, and then there's a cloud. But we've gotten operators now working so well with our cloud environment that it's become pretty much second nature now. They're getting really, really, really familiar with it, and they really enjoy the ability to just step into a room, light up their AWS instance, bring up their nodes, their fabrics, their workloads, everything. Everything's pretty much a one-button, start. It starts up what they need for their room, and they can pretty much take that to any one of the other cloud-capable rooms and just sit in it and call up their production, and they're good to go. So that's they're getting really familiar with that. But I think that the key to that was being able to put something in front of them that put the buttons kind of in a place where they were already comfortable, and that's kind of been where we've been winning people over.
Yeah, on our pre-call, that was kind of what impressed me the most about the way that you kind of approach things. You really approach things from a user-centric angle first, and I thought that was really a wise move.
Yeah, we're looking at, we want them to treat the switcher like a traditional switcher, route to the switcher. They do understand, we've taught them that, everything that's actually happening in the background, we want them to know, it's traditional for us to kind of want to know the whole signal flow of things. So they do have that. We do have dashboards that kind of show them the whole thing and give them, a general idea of everything that's going on throughout the entire path, makes them feel better about what's going on, gives them a lot more visibility into what's going on throughout the entire chain, and gives them the tools right at their hands to be able to troubleshoot issues that in the past would have required a call to engineering and probably several minutes to even resolve that. Where now it's like, all right, I see a problem. And before that becomes a problem, I'm going to go ahead and reset this. And nobody's the wiser. It just works. And mind you, that doesn't happen often. But of course it happens, as it does with really anything. But it's been very positive.
Yeah, and the one thing I think that, Jeff, we talked a little bit on the pre-call was that at the pandemic, when we really all started to lean into the cloud, everything we were doing was smart people taking a streaming service and trying to stack on top of it. And of course, there were some negative consequences to that, especially for the operators. And I think it's important to get people in front of what we've done in the last 5 years. Because in the last 5 years, a lot of vendors, a lot of them are in this room, there's new platforms, there's new stuff, and in those 5 years, we've built stuff from the ground up. You guys have built everybody in this room is built from the ground up with some eye to the professional level, not just a Twitch streamer, not somebody going for views on TikTok and trying to combine audio and video, which is what we did to get television sort of back up. But now it's television professionals going, this is how we build this with some time and some resources, and then getting those operators to sit in front of it. And almost all of them, you sit them in front of a new station, 15 minutes later, they're like, okay, I get it now. And that's the biggest way I think we've overcome the fear is just say, just sit in front of it. Here it is, and look at it and see what you do and go from there.
Yeah, the demonstration part has been critical for us to assuage those fears, not just for the operators, but for our leadership as well. It's been a combination of educating folks, not just engineering, but the entire organization on how it works, but even more importantly, providing POCs and opportunities for folks to sit down in front of the switcher or experience the systems running just like they do on-prem.
Yeah, and we did, at NAB this year, we had a live show that we were running from our booth, and we had built a little production control room at the booth. And what was really interesting to observe is that we to your point, we used a lot of kind of the traditional broadcast vendors, newer cloud-based products. So for example, we had a Calrec mixing desk, we had an Evert Streamcatcher replay station, we had a Ross TD panel for doing the switching. And one of the really interesting observations I made is that when I was talking to people at the booth and showing them our little production control room, most people didn't even realize that it was actually all running in the cloud. They thought we had just built a control room at the show because it looked and operated, just like just like an on-prem control room would. And a lot of people were very surprised to see, like, oh wow, that looks just like my control room in my facility. And when I push buttons, things change just like they do in my facility. But you have to explain to them that it's actually all running in the cloud because it looks and feels exactly the same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
without the training piece, there's no way you're going to get a group of production folks that don't want to sit in the same room together, right?
Yeah.
And so in order to get to the kind of the next step, which is you don't have to be here to cut this show, you really have to have a comfort level among the professionals cutting your show that they're not going to regret that, right?
And I think the last thing for me is, and I thought about it when you were mentioning it there, is when you're talking to leadership about some of this, and there's concerns about various issues, but the one thing that I always come back to is the resources that exist in what we call the cloud, right? Essentially, we all understand it to be, it's probably a server farm somewhere. And my thing is always, if a server farm has failed in the US, it's made the news. So if you have a hardware issue with stuff that's going to the cloud, you probably have a pretty elegant or quick solution to deploy to back yourself up, to have redundancy, because the way that the cloud is structured and the way that we're accessing it and the vendors we're using to access it, it's a much larger platform than I think, it's not our little portion of television that's going through it. That server farm is doing everything. It's doing banking and it's doing, healthcare, it's doing all these things. So it's a reliable platform. You just have to trust the access to it. And I think when you can start to frame it in that way, it's easier to sell the leadership who might not understand the access part. But it's we just need to access this, but the product itself exists and it's very robust and it's very backed up and that's just a way to we're just working on our access to it.
Yeah, I mean, and also you also demonstrate the cost of redundancy, right? And the cost of redundancy on-prem is enormous compared to the cost of redundancy in the cloud, right?
Right.
Speaking on the redundancy part, we had an incident not too long ago that actually had an impact on air, not cloud related, but the on-site truck, the power went out at the venue. And yeah, you're right. You remember this one, right? The
Yeah,
power
heard
went
about
out.
that one.
But because the power went out, that switcher went out. But in the cloud, for our integration room, we're actually running two tied together switchers on completely separate nodes that are running. So if one goes out, the other one's always going. We're actually controlling both of them simultaneously all the time. And that's one thing that you don't get in a control room. For as much redundancy and dual power and everything that you throw at it, you still got one switcher frame that's actually running the show. Even though you're doing a main and a backup output, it's still coming out of that one switcher frame. And unless you're tying switcher frames together at an exorbitant cost, for the few times that you might experience a failure, it's kind of overkill. But in the cloud, it's really, we're just spinning up another.
Yeah, it's just the way you do business in the
Yeah,
cloud.
it's another one, and we tie them together. We want 3, 4, 5 switchers. You just tie them all together.
And by the way, you turn it off when you don't need it. I mean, it's so funny because I get the question a lot of like, oh no, it's not reliable. What if something happens? And it's like, I've been selling you full control rooms in traditional. I was at Sony, at Grass. I'm sorry, I don't remember you having a full entire backup control room. I would have loved it. I would have made my quota really easily. But it wasn't like that, and you weren't freaking out that what if the switcher goes down or something else. This is the opposite. You actually have way more reliability, and what you were saying, you don't have to build for worst case scenario or a backup. So you just spin one up and spin it down.
And here's your tech support. Did you try restarting it? Right? And that usually takes care of it.
I think that does take some time to build comfort
Yes.
in, right? So if we have a control room, but the switcher doesn't exist until Thursday when we need it, that's terrifying to most
Yeah.
engineers. But that's what we do have to build our comfort with. Like if it's our ingest server, there's one of them until I need 20, and then they turn on, and that's wild.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think just earlier today I was having a discussion about that, and the same fears do come up: latency, connectivity, and actually even things beyond technical aspect. A lot of questions and fears around the financial model. Is it really a cost savings? And I'll tell you, doing a side-by-side comparison, here's a switcher on-prem and here's a switcher in the cloud, and the application and this and that is not really a fair way of looking at it all, because what you're talking about, that flexibility, you don't need to buy the largest switcher because one event per year is going to be that large. You actually, maybe for 90% of your time, are using something much smaller, and okay, for that day event, you can scale up to that large thing. So what other areas have you found where that cloud flexibility has had an impact on
Replay is the easy answer
Okay.
here, because certainly I can have a number of replay channels in the cloud that would be ridiculous to try to put into a truck, right? And I can basically go and use the cloud as my kind of league-wide meet me room for signals, and essentially on a busy game night, if I want to do replays from every other game happening that night, and as well as 20 or 30 ISO cameras coming from that one arena, it's not insane to stand up a replay system that can do that in the cloud. It would be absolutely madness to try to do it in a truck.
Yeah, and to your point, it also, I think, decouples some of the capability from what's in the truck to what you can actually put into the show. So, for example, we have broadcasters today, customers today, that are actually running like super slow-mo out of the cloud for more traditional REMI-based on-prem production. So they're running kind of a hybrid production where they've got elements of the production running in the cloud, like the super slow-mo or perhaps the graphics or something like that. And then the actual audio and video is still happening kind of in a traditional control room. But that gives you the ability to say, hey, I'm going to send a 6-phase camera out to this game, but I don't need to upgrade the replay system in the truck to be able to get that super slow-mo ability for that show.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we always talk about it doesn't have to be all or nothing, hybrid cloud, but also hybrid workflows. I'm curious if you're finding that once you get people comfortable with cloud and once you start using cloud, are you expanding like horizontally or vertically? Are you finding that you're beginning to do your entire production, but a certain type of production in the cloud, or just one thing, you're doing a lot more replay?
I think it's sneaky. It disappears into the background, right?
Okay.
We've hit that tipping point with storage, for example, and we're doing a lot more cloud storage in the background, and the users don't think about it, and that's what makes it a good idea. We do have to pay more attention too, though, because with the different tiering, you can hurt yourself very easily.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, again, right now, technically, we're there. They're telling you we're there. They're doing things, and this is major league. These are major players doing things in the cloud. But I think we still have a ways to go to making it easy. And I don't even mean technically easy. I mean financially easy for your purchasing.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean,
There you go.
I'm not going to call anybody out, but I mean, there are a lot of licensing schemes that do not work well in the cloud. And certainly, I know that we're all hopeful that these companies kind of figure out a kind of a better way to build that part of it. That's kind of a big deal right now. Yeah.
It's a huge deal. I will speak on behalf of manufacturers because that's where I came from. I'm in an integrator, but I came from the manufacturing world. Honestly, everybody's trying to figure out how to do it. I was in charge of the commercial, the not engineering side of AMP, of Agile Media Processing Platform from GV, and we were trying, man. We really are like, okay, if we build it for the flexibility of you can choose one little thing and just one thing and pay hourly, well, then if somebody's going to use that, full time, the cost is going to be through the roof. Okay, let's do it the opposite. All in one, X amount per year, it's yours. You can use it as much or as little. Well, gee, I only needed one thing. That's horrible. Now I'm paying, $900 an hour because I could do it all, but I don't want it all. I want one thing. So I tease. I remember another SVG panel where somebody asked, when are you guys going to make this easy? When are you going to not be challenging on how the pricing is? And I said, if anybody knows how, tell me, tell us, tell the manufacturers. We'll listen, right, Bob? You guys are listening. You're creating new models on how to price things, but it is still a challenge. And so talk to me a little bit about how you're overcoming it.
So certainly there are the token-based schemes out there that are like, okay, buy a token and it's good for 24 hours.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but for any time that we're doing something bespoke that's kind of large,
Yeah.
you're going to have a rehearsal day.
Yes.
And I'm like, I want a non-production price for rehearsal tokens. Is that a lot to ask? And that's just something that's very difficult to kind of like figure out exactly how that's going to work, right? Because if you're the company selling a token-based product, then how do you police the usage, really, right? And so it's a complicated problem. But certainly, like things like licensing a piece of software for a number of seats for a whole season,
Yeah.
when you don't necessarily know going in how many opportunities you're going to have to use that, right? Because lots of us have rights restrictions about what we can do with our own content, right? So really going and buying that year-long license and just paying for it and maybe using it 6 times and maybe using it 12, right? It becomes a lot better product and price-wise per usage if you use it 12 than 6, right? And if you're only using it a couple of times, kind of a fairly steep toll to pay, right? So there's lots of thinking to be done there, and I think it varies by what the product is, but it's a challenge to come up with a good way that would work well for both entities.
And especially when we're doing best in breed and we're pulling together many different products to put a workflow solution together, and each product has their own licensing model. I cannot tell you how much of my time I spend trying to help customers figure that out. My engineers are putting together the best solution, and then I'm trying to put together all the pricing and touch on that. Yes, I can tell you per hour or per event, but this really works better at scale. But you're not at scale in the beginning because you're trying to get used to it. But I promise you, once you get to scale, it's actually cheaper. And yeah, I agree. Jim, what?
Oh, I was just going to say, it's tricky because it's always measured against a perpetual license, whether that's
Yes.
a 1 year or a permanent license, or how much work can you do in 365 days.
Yep.
So it almost has to get tied back to usage in some way, but that's not fair if I only want to use it once.
I know. Which is part of this, the scalability you want. You want the ability to spin something up for one new show you're trying out, right?
I was going to add to that, so we use kind of a monthly subscription model, and
Yeah.
when we need to scale up, we just buy a couple more subscriptions for a couple months. But I want to point out the real value here is that there's that sandbox environment where we get to go in there and build and iterate and test and come up with all kinds of different things and not have to do that at cost. We're able to do that just as many times for as long as we want, and build something and craft it so that it's exactly what we need for exactly when we need it, and then deploy that very easily into our production environment. So let's not overlook that, the sandbox. Get to play in there.
Yeah, I mean, it is the ultimate innovation playground from that perspective, right? You couldn't, I've said this many times, you can't go and do a one-off POC when you're all on-prem and you got to cable things and stack servers and things like that. You can't do it inside of a month. I could do it in 2 days in the cloud, like less than that. If I want to have a hackathon, we could do it 18 hours, right?
Well, and the iteration, right? The ability to keep innovating. That's the other thing I always say. A couple things that, like I say often, if you know me, I'm passionate about this. And a lot of it has to do with that ability to iterate and the ability to always have something that's the best of what you have. Look, I made my career, I took care of my kids on selling traditional hardware where I knew you'd be back in 5 years and spend another however many millions. But by year 4, you were looking at things where you're like, God, I have a little envy. He just built his, and it's way nicer than what I've got. Well, I'll tell you, with these types of workflows, you can iterate and change. So no offense to any manufacturer, but if somebody else comes up with a better switcher, a better replay, a better this, my customer can just change and try that in a sandbox and then start using it. So it's actually motivating manufacturers to really stay competitive and ahead, because SaaS is not forever. You can change your mind the next hour, the next day, the next month. So everybody is really working to keep their products, the best that they can be.
I will say that the products are coming out a lot faster than the documentation, though, and that's one area that's got to get a little bit better. Is we're getting these things and playing with them, and then you open the help file or it's like, oh, this is a help file. All right, figure it out. So, it's really great being able to be like get the best new switcher and just be able to drop it into your production and play with it the day that it comes out, and not have to wait for 5 years for your budget to be able to allow you to buy a new switcher.
And that's one of the powers, too, of the infrastructure as code kind of capability that the cloud unlocks for these workflows is that, let's say you get an updated version of your switcher from your vendor, and you install it and you test it out and you find some issue, you find, hey, this is going to cause a problem for me for my show. You can just, revert back to your previous configuration with the click of a button. You don't have to go and replace things or flash firmwares or any of those complicated things that you used to have to do upgrades and, kind of tiptoe around them. Like now you can be a little bit reckless. You can try things out. You can put things in a sandbox. You can test them in parallel or even in your production environment and then very easily revert them if they're not working for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think over time you have the opportunity to de-silo your content groups, right? Because traditionally, digital has been its own kind of little thing, and social has been doing their own little thing, and then broadcast does its thing. And now, the ability to basically go and have all of them basically using similar tool sets and operating on media that's already in the cloud gives us a huge advantage in scaling kind of all of the content distribution at the same time, as opposed to kind of having to make upgrades in the broadcast area that couldn't be used by digital and couldn't be used by social. So I think there's a huge benefit there too.
So
I think
are
it
you-
also, sorry, I think it also can work to reduce content duplication as well.
Yeah.
Because when you have these silos, everyone's got their own copy of the content. They've all got their own storage. They've all generally got their own MAM or PAM. And when it's all in the cloud and when you kind of tear down those silos, you can have everybody working off the same sets of originals, and you can use technologies like CNAP, which is up and coming to allow everybody to create their own variants and their own profiles and stuff off kind of the same central source of truth.
So how is this impacting talent? I'm very curious because, yes, I will say that I found that mostly when we started this many, like 7 years ago or more, it was the digital or the social areas of your companies that made the move first, that were less risky to do something different and new, and now everybody's doing it. Are you finding that some of the talent that was early adopters are now becoming your broadcast talent, or are you finding that they're still staying in their swim lanes and you're having to train your broadcast talent?
I think we're all still trying to keep up. I mean, everything is changing very quickly, and so we're retraining our staff that have started early, and we're still trying to train our traditional broadcast engineering staff.
Okay, so training is still one of the challenges to still not overcome, but become better and better at?
I think, you'd have to ask my front bench folks, but I think early on, there was a lot of hesitation. I think a lot of it comes around the latency. A lot of the more veteran booth guys, announcers, sideline reporters, they kind of were traumatized by what happened at the coming out of the pandemic and some of that stuff. They had a lot of latency. We were not struggling, but we were working through a lot of challenges. And I think once you can put them in a situation, and I actually saw it on a talent's face when we were in Japan for the opening series for MLB. Marquee Sports Network had talent on site in Tokyo, but they had their production staff back in their studio in Chicago. We were 0.9 seconds round trip from that booth to the studio and back with latency. And as soon as I sat down and the talent put the headset on and the producer got on, like you could see it wash over their face, the comfort of that communication was as close to what they were expecting if the truck was on site in Japan. And it really allowed Marquee to do the broadcast that they would normally do, or and honor those opening games from Japan. But their talent, like you could see them just relax when they saw that latency. And I think that's the big challenge, is you have to get some of these big names that are that might have been burned by calling off tube and saw, a second plus high latency in the early 2020s, get them to sit in front of it, and as soon as they see it, you can see it, they're like, oh, they relax, that confrontation with your talent kind of goes away when they realize that you've worked for them to fix this problem. And that's all they're looking for, is to know that the engineering and technical is there to support them. You've got it, it's working, and then they relax and you can move forward. But you have to get them, again, it's those repetitions. It's setting up a station to have them sit at, whether it's whether it's a TD or whether it's a talent. You just gotta force them at least once to see it, and then usually you can sell them from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the great part about interfacing with talent in this environment is that I can take advantage of any data integrations and graphics treatments I want to make on the return feed in the cloud that basically augments the feed that they're watching as a return with a bunch of statistical information that they may want to use for storytelling, right? So now we can start to kind of say, okay, here's a little editorial cheat sheet, if you will, about what's going on in this game, what the storylines are, and things like that. And you can start to actually fill that in with real-time data coming from social and things like that about what people are talking about that game. And it should allow the talent to become much better informed about what the kind of what the consumers of this game are thinking.
So you're actually making your product better, but you're also making it easier for your talent to be even better at what they do, because there's so much at their fingertips that they can access.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to mention is that, people are very adaptive, and I don't think we give them enough credit for that.
Yeah.
Is, talent, they're operators and onstage talent and stuff, they're used to a certain experience, and they complain when they don't get the experience that they're used to. But when you've done a couple of shows that are a little bit different, maybe the latency is a tiny bit higher, or maybe they have a different set of tools that they're using, it very quickly becomes the new normal, and within a few shows people don't even notice anymore. And I think that's what we tend to make a big deal about being afraid to change things, but people are adaptive and they get used to new things very quickly.
I will say to all of you, the one thing that I ask of you personally is, don't assume that what you saw, I get this a lot, during the pandemic, we were adapting. We were using master control switchers for live production control, and we were doing things. So some of those experiences, people say, wasn't it the best thing for the AMP product and for that? I will say it wasn't. Yes, everybody was interested. Yes, I talked to hundreds of customers, but it was ahead of when it was really at its best. And unfortunately, to this day, I talk to people that are very resistant because they remember the latency or this or that. So the one thing I ask of you is, remember, these products are not only at NAB and IDC coming out with new things. It's every day, it's every minute, it is continuous development and deployment. And as such, don't hold in your head what you saw in your demo or your POC, be it 5 years ago or 5 months ago or sometimes 5 weeks ago. Things are changing rapidly, and as you can hear from our panelists, it's there, it's working now. So give yourselves a chance to try to experience these products. If it's not exactly what you want today, check again tomorrow. It's gonna change. So what did you say? We're at the worst that it could possibly be today, and it's already amazing. So give us all a chance. Please find us at the end of this. We will be roaming around for the rest of the day. We're up on our time, but we'd love to answer questions. Nothing's better than talking to people who are currently using it. So thank you guys. Thank you guys so much.